The massive silhouette loomed in the darkness, its wingspan stretching 20 feet across the ruined laboratory. Dr. Marcus Chen stumbled backward as the creature's bioluminescent patterns pulsed with ethereal blue light, revealing a face that was both insectoid and somehow impossibly familiar. The beast's compound eyes fixed on the armed intruders who had cornered Marcus, and a sound like distant thunder rumbled from its thorax. "Nobody touches him," the creature seemed to say, though no words were spoken. The mercenaries raised their weapons, but Marcus knew they wouldn't stand a chance. After all, the being protecting him had crossed galaxies to find its way here, into his life. And it was only just beginning to reveal what it could do. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. 5 years earlier, the remote research station Polaris VII had been Dr. Marcus Chen's personal hell. Tucked away on an asteroid in the Kuiper Belt, the station was technically part of Earth's deep space research initiative, but in reality, it was where careers went to die. At 42, Marcus had once been considered a rising star in xenobiology, developing revolutionary theories about potential convergent evolution in alien ecosystems. But that was before the Callisto disaster, before his recommendations had led to the loss of 14 colleagues. Now, he was effectively in exile, maintaining outdated equipment and filing reports that no one would read. The station was designed to house 20 researchers, but budget cuts had reduced the staff to just Marcus and his AI assistant, Aria. The vast empty corridors and abandoned labs created an eerie atmosphere that seeped into Marcus's bones like the persistent chill of space. Tonight, as he conducted his routine survey of Section 6, the oldest part of the station dating back almost 50 years, he felt particularly alone. "Aria, log atmospheric readings for Section 6, grid B12, Marcus said, his breath visible in the cold air. The station's power systems had been operating at minimum capacity for months now, another cost-cutting measure from Earth Command. "Atmospheric readings log, Dr. Chen," Aria's synthesized voice replied through his earpiece. "May I note that this is the 14th consecutive week without anomalies in this section?" Marcus sighed. "Just following protocol, Aria." "Understood, Doctor. However, your contract only requires monthly checks of decommissioned sections. And what would you suggest I do with my abundant free time instead?" Marcus asked with a wry smile, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness as he picked his way through the cluttered laboratory space. "Perhaps continue your personal research? Your notes on theoretical xenobiological adaptation mechanisms remain unfinished." Marcus winced. His personal research was little more than a desperate attempt to rebuild his shattered reputation, to prove that his theories hadn't been fundamentally flawed. "Maybe tomorrow," he muttered. A sudden flicker of movement caught Marcus's eye. In the corner of the lab, barely visible behind a toppled storage unit, something shifted. Marcus froze, his heart rate spiking. The station was supposed to be sterile, no life forms other than himself and the carefully contained bacterial cultures in the active labs. "Aria, did you register any motion in this sector?" he whispered. "Negative, Doctor. All sensors indicate normal status." Cautiously, Marcus approached the storage unit, moving his light slowly across the floor. Something glistened in the beam of substance, with an oily, iridescent quality that he'd never encountered before. Following the trail of the strange fluid, Marcus pushed aside the storage unit and found himself staring at something that, by all rights, shouldn't exist on the station. It resembled a cocoon, approximately the size of a basketball, with a translucent membranous exterior that pulsed with weak bioluminescence. The surface rippled slightly, reacting to his light. Within the membrane, Marcus could make out a vague shape, curled and complex. "Aria, are you seeing this?" Marcus whispered, activating his wrist camera. "Affirmative, Doctor. Object appears to be of biological origin. No match in station inventory or Earth biological database." Marcus knelt beside the cocoon, careful not to touch it. As a xenobiologist, he knew the potential dangers of unknown organisms. Yet his scientific curiosity was fully awakened for the first time in years. "Run a basic spectral analysis based on visual data." After a moment, Aria replied, "Analysis indicates presence of carbon-based compounds consistent with biological structures. but molecular organization is unlike any Earth-based life form. Caution is advised. How could this have gotten here? Yes, Marcus murmured, more to himself than to Arya. The station had been sealed for years, with supply drones being the only regular visitors. Nothing living had come aboard in at least 5 years. As he studied the cocoon, he noticed that the pulsing bioluminescence was growing fainter. The membrane appeared to be drying out, losing structural integrity. Arya, I think it's dying, Marcus said, feeling an unexpected pang of concern for the mysterious organism. That assessment appears correct. Membrane desiccation accelerating, internal vital signs decreasing. Making a split-second decision that would alter the course of his life, Marcus removed his outer jacket and gently wrapped it around the cocoon. Arya, prepare Containment Lab 3 for an unknown biological specimen. Full quarantine protocols. Dr. Chen, station regulations require notification to Earth Command before introducing unknown biological entities. There's no time, Marcus interrupted. And you know as well as I do that Earth Command would just order me to destroy it. Log it as a routine exercise of containment protocols if anyone asks. As Marcus carefully lifted the cocoon, he felt it twitch within his jacket. Something about its fragility stirred long-dormant protective instincts within him. For years, he had lived with the guilt of the Callisto disaster, of being responsible for the loss of life. Now, perhaps, he had a chance to save something instead. The journey back to the active section of the station seemed longer than usual, each step carefully measured to avoid jostling his precious cargo. The cocoon felt surprisingly warm through the fabric of his jacket, and occasionally it would pulse with that strange blue bioluminescence, as if responding to his proximity. Containment Lab 3 was small but well-equipped, originally designed for the study of potentially hazardous microorganisms. Marcus placed the cocoon on the examination table, underneath the array of sensors that would allow for detailed analysis without direct contact. Initiate full-spectrum analysis, Arya. Non-invasive protocols only, Marcus instructed as he sealed the lab door behind him. Over the next several hours, Marcus watched in fascination as Arya compiled data on the mysterious life form. The cocoon's outer membrane consisted of complex proteins unlike anything in Earth's biological record, yet contained familiar elements: carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and trace amounts of more bass. Exotic elements. Doctor, the entity appears to be in a state of stasis, similar to but distinct from hibernation in Earth organisms, Arya reported. However, its biological processes are failing. Without intervention, total system collapse is estimated within 12 hours. Marcus rubbed his tired eyes. What kind of intervention would help? Unknown. Without precedent for this life form's requirements, any intervention carries significant risk. Marcus paced the small lab, weighing his options. The scientist in him knew that the safest course would be to observe, document the organism's decline, and perform a thorough autopsy afterward. That would be the prudent approach, the one Earth Command would insist upon, but something deeper, something more human, rebelled against that clinical detachment. This was potentially the first confirmed extraterrestrial life form ever encountered by humanity. More than that, it was a living being, struggling to survive. Arya, based on the membrane composition, can you suggest an environmental condition that might slow the deterioration? After a brief calculation, Arya responded. The membrane appears to require higher humidity than station standard. Increasing ambient moisture by 35% may reduce desiccation rate. Do it. Do it, Marcus ordered, and watched as fine mist began to spray into the containment chamber. The effect was almost immediate. The cocoon's surface seemed to grow more supple, the pulsing light strengthening slightly. Improvement noted, Arya confirmed. However, core biological processes continued to deteriorate. Marcus leaned closer to the observation window, studying the cocoon. Within the translucent membrane, he could now make out more details of the creature inside what appeared to be folded limbs, and structures that might be wings, all curled tightly together. It's like some kind of metamorphosis, he murmured. Arya, search Earth biological databases for similar metamorphic processes. Most similar Earth analogs would be Lepidoptera and Tupation, the transformation stage between caterpillar and moth or butterfly. Arya replied. However, The scale and complexity are orders of magnitude greater. A moth. The shape did resemble a giant moth in some ways, though the proportions were alien. Marcus found himself wondering what the creature might look like if it were healthy, if it completed its transformation. What else does it need? Marcus whispered. What am I missing? He spent the next few hours adjusting various environmental factors: temperature, light exposure, atmospheric composition, noting how the cocoon responded to each change. Gradually, he developed a profile of conditions that seemed to stabilize the entity, though its core systems were still weakening. As he worked, Marcus realized that this was the most engaged he had felt in years. The mystery of the cocoon had awakened something in him that had been dormant since Callisto, the pure joy of discovery, of facing the unknown. In the early hours of the station's artificial morning, Marcus found himself nodding off at the lab console when Area voice jolted him awake. Dr. Chen, the cocoon is exhibiting new behavior. Marcus blinked sleep from his eyes and looked at the containment chamber. The cocoon was pulsing more rapidly now, and a small tear had appeared in the membrane near what Marcus had been thinking of as the top of the structure. Is it dying? He asked, alarmed. Negative. Energy readings are actually intensifying. This appears to be a new phase of activity. From the tear in the membrane, a small appendage emerged, thin, delicate, and covered in fine, silvery filaments that caught the light. It waved slowly in the air, as if testing or sensing its environment. Incredible, Marcus breathed. Then the appendage turned, orienting directly toward him, despite the separation of the containment wall. It was almost as if the creature sensed his presence specifically. The appendage extended further, revealing what appeared to be a small, jointed limb ending in something like a 3-digited hand. The movements were weak, but deliberate, as the limb reached toward the direction where Marcus stood. Aria. Is there any way it could possibly detect me through the containment field? Unknown. The entity may possess sensory capabilities beyond our current understanding. Marcus made a decision that went against all protocol. I'm going in. Dr. Chen, containment protocols explicitly forbid override containment protocols. Authorization Chen Alpha 69, Marcus said firmly. Record that I'm accepting full responsibility for this decision. The containment chamber door hissed open, and Marcus stepped inside, approaching the examination table slowly. The protruding limb quivered, still pointing directly at him. Up close, the creature's alien nature was even more apparent. The membrane had a complex pattern of microscopic structures that seemed to shift and flow like liquid crystal. The limb itself was covered in structures that resembled both scales and feathers, with an iridescent quality that shifted through colors Marcus couldn't even name. Hesitantly, Marcus extended his own hand, stopping a few inches from the creature's appendage. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, with visible effort, the alien limb stretched the remaining distance and made contact with Marcus's fingertips. The sensation was unlike anything Marcus had ever experienced, like a mild electric current, mixed with a feeling of falling, but somehow not unpleasant. Images flashed through his mind too quickly to comprehend, accompanied by emotions that didn't feel like his own: fear, confusion, relief. Marcus gasped and almost pulled away, but something told him that breaking the connection now would be dangerous for the creature. Instead, he maintained contact, trying to project calm and reassurance through whatever strange link had been established. I'm trying to help you, he whispered. The limb curled weakly around his finger, and the cocoon's pulsing light synchronized with Marcus's heartbeat. A sense of desperate need flowed through the connection, along with something that felt remarkably like gratitude. Then, inexplicably, Marcus knew what the creature required. He couldn't have explained how he obtained this knowledge, but the certainty was absolute. Aria, he said, his voice steady despite the strangeness of the situation. I need you to synthesize a nutrient solution, specific formula to follow. Over the next hour, Marcus dictated a complex biochemical formula that he somehow understood would provide the sustenance the creature needed. When the solution was prepared, a thick, amber liquid with a faint bioluminescence of its own, Marcus carefully applied it to the cocoon's membrane, which absorbed it readily. The effect was dramatic. The cocoon's light strengthened, the pulsing became more regular, and the tear in the membrane began to seal itself. The protruding limb gave Marcus's finger one more gentle squeeze, before withdrawing back into the cocoon. Marcus stumbled out of the containment chamber, exhausted but exhilarated. "Arya, maintain these exact conditions and prepare more of the nutrient solution. Alert me to any changes." "Acknowledged, Doctor. May I inquire as to how you determined the necessary formula?" Marcus shook his head, unable to explain the knowledge that had flowed into him during that brief contact. "I don't know, Arya. I just knew." As he made his way to his quarters for some much-needed rest, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had changed. The creature in the cocoon hadn't just communicated with him, it had formed a connection. And through that connection, Marcus had experienced something profound, a sense that he was no longer alone in the universe. In the days that followed, Marcus devoted himself entirely to the care of the mysterious cocoon. The creature inside remained dormant, but the cocoon itself grew stronger, its bioluminescence stable, and its membrane healthy. Marcus continued to synthesize the nutrient solution, finding that he instinctively knew when adjustments were needed to its composition. More strangely, he began experiencing dreams unlike any he'd had before, visions of soaring through skies that weren't Earth's, under light from a sun that burned a different color. He saw landscapes of impossible geometry, felt the sensation of bodies that weren't human, lived fragments of lives he'd never known. Each morning, he would wake with new insights about the creature's biology and needs. "Arya, I think it's communicating with me," he confessed on the fourth day, after waking from a particularly vivid dream. "Not with words, but with experiences, memories maybe." "Fascinating," the AI replied. "This suggests a form of consciousness transfer or telepathic capability, neither of which has scientific precedent." Marcus laughed softly. "A lot of what's happening doesn't have precedent." He gazed at the cocoon through the observation window. "I think it's preparing me." "For what purpose, Doctor?" "For when it emerges." The certainty in his voice surprised even him. A week after finding the cocoon, Marcus received his monthly communication packet from Earth Command: routine updates, supply manifests, and a brief message noting that his station contract was being reviewed for potential early termination. The message might have devastated him once, but now it barely registered. His focus had shifted entirely to the mystery unfolding in Containment Lab 3. That night, the dreams changed. Instead of alien worlds, Marcus saw fragments of the station itself, corridors he recognized, equipment he used daily but from a different perspective, as if seen through other eyes. And throughout the dreamscape ran a persistent sense of danger, of threat approaching. He awoke with a start. "Arya, run a full station diagnostic. External sensors first." "May I ask why, Doctor?" "Just do it, please. Look for any anomalous signals or approaches." A minute later, Arya reported, "All systems nominal. No vessels detected within sensor range. However, there is a minor discrepancy in the long-range scanner data from the past 48 hours. Marcus sat up straighter. "What kind of discrepancy?" 3 momentary signal disruptions, each lasting less than 1 second, previously categorized as sensor glitches. "Show me the timing pattern." When Arya displayed the data, Marcus felt a chill. The disruptions weren't random, they followed a pattern that suggested deliberate scanning, the kind used to probe defenses without triggering alerts. "Someone's been testing our sensor blind spots," he murmured. "That conclusion is not supported by available evidence," Arya responded. "The statistical probability favors equipment malfunction." Marcus shook his head. "Run a level 2 encryption on all research data regarding our guest. Authorization locked to my biometrics only. Dr. Chen, such measures are typically reserved for classified research. Just do it." "Arya." Marcus was already pulling on his clothes, preparing to check on the cocoon. When he reached Containment Lab 3, he found the cocoon pulsing more rapidly than before, its bioluminescence cycling through colors at an accelerated rate. As he watched, the pattern began to resolve into what appeared to be symbols or glyphs that flowed across the membrane surface. "Arya, are you recording this?" "Affirmative. Dr. Pattern recognition algorithms are attempting to decode the symbols, but no match found in any known linguistic database." Marcus placed his hand against the containment glass. Immediately, the symbols reoriented toward him, the light pulsing in time with his heartbeat once again. Without considering the implications, he entered the containment chamber and approached the cocoon. This time, he didn't wait for the creature to make contact. He reached out and placed his palm directly against the membrane. The connection was immediate and overwhelming, not just images or emotions now, but a torrent of information, concepts without words, knowledge without context. When he finally broke contact, Marcus was on his knees, gasping. "Arya," he managed. "We need to prepare." "Prepare for what, Doctor?" Marcus looked up at the cocoon, which had returned to a steady, calm pulse. "For visitors. I don't think they're friendly." In the 2 weeks that followed, Marcus worked feverishly on 2 parallel tracks. First, he implemented every security measure and early warning system that the station's limited resources would allow, converting dormant science equipment into makeshift sensors and repurposing maintenance drones for perimeter monitoring. His second focus was on the cocoon, which was showing increasing signs of activity. The membrane had begun to stretch and contract rhythmically, and the shape within was clearly more defined now, larger than before. Through regular mental contact, Marcus learned fragments of the creature's story. It was indeed an extraterrestrial being, one of a species ancient beyond human comprehension, spacefaring, but not in the sextet way humans understood the concept. "They don't build ships," Marcus explained to Arya after one particularly intense connection session. "They are the ships in a way. They can traverse the void between stars through some kind of biological adaptation. Such capabilities would violate current understanding of physics," Arya noted. Marcus smiled wryly. "A lot of what's in that cocoon violates our understanding of physics." From what Marcus could piece together, the creature which he had begun to think of as Mothra after the ancient Earth films, though he knew this wasn't its true name, had been injured during its journey through space. It had sought shelter on the station, crawling through an abandoned external maintenance hatch decades ago, and had entered its cocoon state to heal and transform. But the process had gone wrong somehow. The station's environment wasn't suitable for its needs, and it had begun to die until Marcus found it. Their connection had saved its life, allowing it to continue its metamorphosis. What troubled Marcus were the fragments of information about the visitors Mothra had warned him about. They were hunters of some kind, collectors who sought rare biological specimens throughout the galaxy. They had been tracking Mothra's species for generations, and somehow they had detected its presence on the station. On the 18th day after finding the cocoon, Arya's voice broke into Marcus's sleep cycle. "Dr. Chen, unidentified vessel approaching. Configuration matches no known Earth or allied design." Marcus was instantly alert. Distance and approach vector? Currently at outer sensor range, approaching on a direct course to the station. Estimated arrival in 6 hours at current velocity. Marcus rushed to the control center, pulling up the sensor data. The approaching vessel was small by deep space standards, roughly the size of an Earthcutter-class ship, with an unusual hull configuration that seemed designed to absorb rather than reflect sensor scans. "They're trying to stay stealthy," Marcus murmured. "Arya, any response to identification queries?" "Negative, Doctor. The vessel is not broadcasting any identification and has not responded to automated hails." End quote. Key. Marcus took a deep breath. "Initiate security protocol Chen Alpha 7. Cut all external communications and power down all non-essential systems. Make us look abandoned." As Arya complied, Marcus made his way to Containment Lab 3. The cocoon was pulsing frantically now, the symbols on its surface flowing with increasing speed. "They're coming for you, aren't they?" Marcus said softly, placing his hand on the membrane without hesitation. The flood of images confirmed his fears. The hunters had traced Mothra's energy signature, despite its dormant state. They would not be deterred by finding a human presence. If anything, they would simply consider Marcus an additional specimen, or an obstacle to be removed. But there was something else in the connection, this timid sense of imminent change, of transformation nearly complete. Mothra was preparing to emerge, but it needed more time the approaching hunters might not allow. "How long do you need?" Marcus asked aloud, focusing on the question through their mental link. The answer came not in words, but in a sense of planetary rotation, approximately 20 Earth hours. far longer than the 6 hours until the hunters arrived. Marcus broke the connection with a new sense of resolve. "Arya, I need to access the station's defensive systems. Dr. Chen, Polaris the 7th is a research station. It has no defensive capabilities beyond standard emergency protocols. Every deep space installation has defensive options, Arya. They're just not in the standard operations manual." Marcus began typing rapidly at the control console. "Override command shell. Authorization Chen Final Override Zulu." The screen flickered, then displayed a new interface, one that had been hidden beneath the standard operating system. Earth might consider Polaris the 7th expendable, but they hadn't left it completely defenseless. "Limited countermeasures available," Arya reported through this new system interface. "One defensive drone, with minimal armament, emergency field generators capable of deflecting small debris, and station-wide lockdown protocols." Not much, but it would have to do. Marcus began formulating a plan not to defeat the hunters outright, which would be impossible with such limited resources, but to buy time. Time for Mothra to complete its transformation. Something told him that once that happened, the dynamic would shift dramatically. As the hours ticked down, Marcus prepared the station methodically. He rigged sensor ghosts to make it appear that the station had suffered catastrophic life support failure in certain sections. He programmed the defensive drone to patrol in a pattern that suggested automated rather than directed control. And most importantly, he created a false data trail indicating that an emergency evacuation pod had launched shortly after the system failure, presumably with the station's sole occupant aboard. With less than an hour until the hunters' arrival, Marcus returned to Containment Lab 3. The cocoon was now pulsing with a steady, strong light, the being inside clearly visible through the increasingly transparent membrane. It had indeed grown, now nearly the size of a human, with folded structures that could only be wings, and a body that combined insectoid and almost avian features. "I've done everything I can," Marcus told it, placing his hand on the cocoon for what might be the last time. "I'm going to hide, make them think the station is abandoned. With luck, they'll just do a quick sweep and move on, thinking you left with me in the escape pod." The creature's response through their link was complex gratitude, mingled with concern, and something else Marcus hadn't felt before: protectiveness. Despite its vulnerable state, Mothra was worried about him. "I'll be okay," Marcus assured it, though he wasn't at all certain this was true. "Just focus on completing your transformation." The connection between them surged unexpectedly. Then Marcus gasped as new information poured into his mind. Star maps, spatial coordinates, and a sense of direction that transcended normal human perception. Mothra was showing him something: a place, distant but reachable. "Is this where you're from?" Marcus whispered. The impression he received was affirmative, but complicated. Not exactly a homeworld, but a place of gathering, of safety. A place where Mothra's kind could meet with humans without fear. "You want me to go there? With you?" Again, the impression was complex. Not an immediate invitation, but a possibility, a future option if he chose it. For now, survival was the priority. The station's proximity alert broke the moment. "Dr. Chen," Arya announced, "the unidentified vessel has entered our outer perimeter and is initiating a scan pattern." Marcus reluctantly broke contact with the cocoon. "I'll come back," he promised. "Stay silent, stay still." He hurried to his hiding place, a maintenance shaft, tucked between the walls of 2 storage compartments, which he had carefully modified to mask life signs. As he sealed himself inside, Arya's voice came through his portable communicator, barely above a whisper. "Vessel has docked at external airlock 7. Station sensors detect 3 humanoid life forms boarding." Marcus checked the small monitor he had rigged to the station's security system. The camera feeds showed 3 figures entering the station, bipedal and roughly human in shape, but clearly not human. They wore form-fitting suits that seemed partially biological themselves, with helmets that revealed no features. Each carried what appeared to be weapons, along with other equipment Marcus couldn't pad. "Identify." "Running standard search pattern," Arya reported softly. They appeared to be using advanced sensor technology to detect biological signatures. Marcus's heart raced as he watched the hunters methodically move through the station. They were thorough and professional, pausing occasionally to collect samples or examine equipment. Their movement suggested they had done this many times before. When they reached the section containing his quarters, they spent extra time examining his personal effects, apparently confirming the presence of the human occupant. One hunter activated a device that projected a holographic display, which appeared to be tracking the false trajectory Marcus had created for the escape pod. "They're buying it," Marcus whispered. The hunters continued their sweep, moving steadily closer to Containment Lab 3. Marcus held his breath as they approached the lab door, which he had deliberately left unsecured to avoid raising suspicion. The lead hunter paused at the entrance, its helmet tilting as if sensing something. Then, to Marcus's horror, the hunter raised a device that emitted a pulse of energy. The lab door slid open, and all three hunters entered. Marcus switched the monitor view to the lab's internal camera. The hunters surrounded the cocoon, their postures suggesting excitement or triumph. One operated a scanning device that projected data directly into their helmets, while another prepared what appeared to be a containment unit. The lead hunter extended a gloved hand toward the cocoon, not touching it yet, but clearly preparing to do so. Marcus watched in helpless anger as the hunter produced a cutting tool from its belt. Suddenly, the cocoon's bioluminescence flared blindingly bright. The hunters stepped back, their body language registering surprise. The cocoon began to pulse rapidly, the membrane stretching and tearing as the creature inside moved. "It's too early," Marcus whispered. "You're not ready." But the emergence had begun. Through the monitor, Marcus watched as the cocoon split open along its length, revealing glimpses of the being inside: iridescent scales, segmented limbs, folded wings still wet with metamorphic fluid. The hunters recovered quickly from their surprise and moved to surround the emerging creature, weapons raised. The lead hunter activated its containment unit, which generated a field of energy around the examination table. Marcus couldn't bear to watch and do nothing. Without conscious decision, he found himself leaving his hiding place, moving through the station's corridors toward the lab. Some part of him knew this was foolish. He was unarmed, facing three technologically advanced alien hunters. But the pull with his connection to Mothra overrode his caution. He reached the lab entrance just as Mothra fully emerged from its cocoon. The sight took his breath away. The creature stood nearly 7 feet tall, with a body structure unlike anything in Earth's evolutionary history. It resembled a moth in its basic form, but with elements that seemed avian and almost mammalian as well. Its wings, still folded and damp, showed hints of intricate patterns that seemed to shimmer with bioluminescence. Its head featured compound eyes that glowed bay, with an inner light, flanked by feathery antennae that moved with deliberate precision. Most striking was its coloration, shifting patterns of blue, silver, and colors Marcus had no words for, creating complex designs across its body that seemed to hold meaning, like a language written in light. The hunters had it surrounded, their containment field preventing it from fully extending its wings. The creature's movements were weak, uncoordinated. Clearly, it had emerged prematurely, forced by the threat. Without thinking, Marcus rushed into the lab. "Stop!" he shouted. The hunters turned toward him, weapons shifting to track this new threat. The lead hunter made a gesture, and one of the others moved to intercept Marcus, producing a device that extended into a staff-like weapon. Marcus dodged the first swing, his body moving with surprising agility fueled by adrenaline. Area, Emergency Protocol, Authorization Chen Omega-0, end quote. The lab lights flickered, then went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. The hunter's containment field wavered, but held. In the darkness, the only sources of light were the hunter's helmet displays and Mothra's bioluminescent patterns, which now pulsed rapidly, almost like a heartbeat. Marcus used the confusion to circle around behind the lead hunter, grabbing a heavy piece of lab equipment as he moved. With all his strength, he swung it at the hunter's containment field generator. The impact sent electric shocks up Marcus's arms, but the device sparked, and the field fluctuated. The lead hunter turned toward Marcus, raising its weapon. In that moment, Mothra moved with unexpected speed. Despite its weakened state, it lunged forward through the failing containment field. interposing itself between Marcus and the hunter. The creature's wing membrane unfurled partially, creating a shield of shifting blue light. The hunter fired its weapon, a pulse of energy that struck Mothra's wing. Instead of penetrating, the energy seemed to be absorbed into the bioluminescent patterns, which flared brightly in response. Mothra's compound eyes fixed on the hunter, and for the first time, Marcus heard the creature's voice not audibly, but directly in his mind. A complex harmony of tones, underlying a single clear concept. Mine to protect. The patterns on Mothra's wings intensified, shifting to form complex geometric designs that pulsed with increasing speed. The air in the lab seemed to thicken. Charged with an energy Marcus could feel against his skin. The hunters backed away, clearly recognizing a threat they hadn't anticipated. They communicated with each other through gestures, regrouping by the lab entrance. The lead hunter raised its weapon again, adjusting some control on its surface. Before it could fire, Mothra's wings fully extended for the first time, a 20-foot span of translucent membrane covered in patterns that now glowed so brightly they illuminated the entire lab. The patterns coalesced into a single, complex design that seemed to bend the light around it. A wave of force emanated from the wings, invisible but powerful enough to throw the hunters backward against the lab wall. Their weapons clattered to the floor, and their helmet displays flickered and died. Marcus found himself untouched by the force, protected somehow by his connection to the creature. He watched in awe as Mothra rose to its full height, its body now straightening, strength visibly flowing into its limbs. The hunters scrambled to their feet, retreating their weapons. The lead hunter activated a communication device on its wrist, likely calling for backup from their ship. Mothra turned her eye to Marcus, its compound eyes fixing on him with unmistakable intelligence. In his mind, he heard/felt its communication. Not safe here. Must leave. I understand, Marcus replied aloud. But I don't think you're strong enough yet to travel through space. Mothra's response conveyed disagreement, along with images of its ship which Marcus now understood was not separate from the creature, but a biological adaptation it could manifest. However, the images were accompanied by a sense of strain, of resources not yet fully recovered. The lead hunter fired its weapon again, this time at Marcus directly. Mothra's wings swept between them with impossible speed, absorbing the energy blast once more. But Marcus could feel through their connection that each such defense taxed the creature's still recovering strength. Aria, Marcus called out. Initiate station defensive sequence. Full countermeasures. The station's emergency systems responded, blast shields dropping over the lab entrances, trapping both hunters and humans inside. The defensive drone Marcus had prepared launched from its dock elsewhere in the station, programmed to target the hunter's vessel. We need to get to the central control room, Marcus told Mothra. I can seal off sections of the station, maybe trap them long enough for you to recover fully. Mothra's response was immediate agreement, along with a surge of determination. The creature moved to Marcus's side, its limbs adapting to a more horizontal posture that reduced its height, making it more mobile in the station's corridors. As the blast shields temporarily lifted to allow their exit, Marcus and Mothra slipped through, leaving the disoriented hunters behind. Marcus led the way through the station's maze-like corridors, taking the most direct route to the control center. Aria, status report on the hunter's vessel, Marcus called out as they moved. The defensive drone has engaged the vessel, minor damage inflicted to their exterior communications array. However, the vessel has activated defensive systems that exceed the drone's capabilities. Estimated drone survival time: 3 minutes. Marcus grimaced. The diversion wouldn't last long. What about the hunters inside the station? They have breached the lab blast shields and are tracking your movement through thermal signatures. Estimated interception in 4 minutes. Through their mental link, Marcus could feel Mothra's assessment of the situation strategic, calculating, but tinged with concern for his safety. The creature moved alongside him with increasing fluidity, its motor control improving by the minute as its new form adapted to the station environment. They reached a junction where the corridor split into 3 separate paths. Marcus hesitated, but Mothra moved decisively toward the rightmost passage, its antennae quivering. That's not the way to the control center, Marcus said. Mothra's response came as a stream of images the hunter's movements through the station. their likely interception point if Marcus continued on his planned route. The creature was somehow sensing their pursuers through means beyond the station's monitoring systems. You can track them, Marcus realized. Lead the way. They diverted through maintenance corridors and service tunnels, Mothra instinctively finding paths that masked their thermal signatures. As they moved, Marcus noticed the bioluminescent patterns on Mothra's wings, shifting constantly, adapting to their surroundings. In narrower passages, the creature's entire physiology seemed to compress, becoming more streamlined without losing massa biological impossibility by human understanding. What you're doing with your body, is that how you travel through space? Marcus asked as they paused at a security checkpoint. The impression he received was affirmative, accompanied by concepts too complex for direct translation, something about dimensional folding, compression of matter without reduction of essence. The creature's species experienced reality in ways humans had barely theorized about. They finally reached the control center, Marcus sealing the reinforced door behind them. The room was small but contained the station's primary systems: environmental control, communications, security, and navigation. ARIA, lockdown status? Hunters have disabled 2 security nodes. Full lockdown integrity at 68% and falling. Defensive drone has been neutralized. The hunter's vessel is now attempting to override our airlock protocols remotely. Marcus moved to the main console, fingers flying across the controls. I'm initiating emergency firewall protocols. Route all system authentication through my personal encryption key. As he worked, Mothra moved around the control room, its compound eyes taking in the technology with evident interest. Through their connection, Marcus sensed no confusion. The creature understood the purpose of the equipment, if not the specific implementation. The hunters aren't just random specimen collectors, Marcus said as he worked. They knew exactly what you are. They came prepared specifically for your species. Mothra's mental response was a cascade of historical impression, centuries of being hunted, specimens of its kind captured for study, for weaponization, for collection. The hunters belonged to a consortium of species that prized biological uniqueness above all, harvesting the galaxy's rarest life forms for profit and power. And what exactly are you? Marcus asked, looking up from the console. I've seen glimpses, but instead of a direct answer, Mothra approached him, its antennae extending toward his temples. Marcus understood the invitation and nodded. The connection that formed was deeper than before. No, just concepts and impressions now, but a structured exchange of knowledge. Mothra's species had evolved on a world circling a dying star, developing biological adaptations that allowed them to survive in increasingly hostile conditions. As their sun failed, they evolved the ability to travel through space by manipulating their own physical structure, condensing and expanding their bodies to traverse the void between stars. They were ancient, solitary travelers, meeting only rarely to exchange genetic material. Each individual carried the collective memory of their species, passed down through specialized neural structures that preserved experiences across generations. Most importantly, they formed symbiotic bonds with other sentient species, not parasitic or controlling, but mutually beneficial attachments that allowed both parties to evolve beyond their natural limitations. Such bonds were rare and sacred, formed only when both beings freely chose the connection. When Marcus had saved Mothra's cocoon, when he had risked himself to nurture a dying alien creature, he had unknowingly initiated such a bond. The creature's emergence had been premature, forced by the hunter's arrival, but the bond was already formed. That's why you protected me, Marcus whispered. We're connected. Mothra's confirmation came with a sense of deep satisfaction, of rightness. The bond was incomplete, still forming, but already strong enough to create a mutual protective instinct. Their moment of understanding was interrupted by area warning. Dr. Chen, the hunters have accessed environmental systems. They are flooding all corridors with a paralytic compound. Marcus looked at the station schematics in alarm. Can you seal the ventilation to this room? Already done, but the compound is designed to penetrate standard filters. Containment estimated at 12 minutes before saturation. Mothra's wings fluttered, the patterns shifting to form new configurations. Through their link, Marcus understood that the creature was analyzing the paralytic agent's molecular structure, preparing countermeasures. You can neutralize it? The response was uncertain, possibly, with time, but not quickly enough to protect the entire station. Marcus needed to find another solution. Arya, what about the emergency evacuation protocol? Can we still access a pod? One evacuation pod remains operational in Bay 2. However, hunters have established position between your location and the bay. Marcus studied the station schematic, looking for alternatives. What if we vent specific sections? Create a clear path by decompressing corridors selectively? Such action would likely result in structural damage to affected sections. Additionally, sensor readings suggest the BIA. Hunter suits are vacuum capable. Moth moved to the console, extending a delicate appendage toward the controls. Its intention flowed through their link not to operate the human technology directly, but to share a solution. Images formed in Marcus's mind. The station's power core, the main reactor that provided energy for all systems. It could be overloaded, not to destroy the station, but to create an electromagnetic pulse that would disable all electronic systems, temporarily including the hunter's equipment. That could work, Marcus said slowly. But it would leave us without life support, without security systems. Moth's response conveyed confidence for a short period. It could sustain them both, providing oxygen and warmth through biological processes. Long enough to reach the evacuation pod. Arya, can you initiate a controlled power core overload? Enough for an EMP but not a full breach? Such a procedure exists in emergency protocols, but requires direct manual activation at the core housing. Remote initiation is not possible due to safety interlocks. Marcus met Moth's compound eyes, which reflected his own determination back at him. Then we go to the core. Together. The power core was located in the station's central section, 2 levels below their current position. To reach it, they would need to traverse corridors increasingly saturated with the paralytic agent, while avoiding direct confrontation with the hunters. Marcus checked a small arms locker in the control center. Finding a standard-issue shock baton not much against the hunter's advanced weapons, but better than nothing. He also gathered emergency breathing apparatus, though he wasn't sure how effective it would be against the specialized paralytic. Arya, create diversions. Trigger alarms in sections away from our route. Acknowledged, Doctor. Diversion protocols initiated. Before leaving the control center, Marcus turned to Mothra. This bond between you, what does it mean for the future? Assuming we survive this. The creature's response was complex images of traveling together among the stars. Of visiting worlds neither had seen before. Of learning and growing through shared experience. But also a sense of choice. Of paths diverging and reconverging. The bond did not determine their fate. It merely opened possibilities. Oh. Let's focus on surviving first, Marcus said with a grim smile. Ready? Moth's wings flared slightly, the pattern shifting to a configuration that Marcus somehow understood was affirmative, even battle-ready. They moved into the corridor, Marcus immediately feeling the effects of the paralytic in the air, a slight numbness in his extremities, a heaviness to his movements. The breathing apparatus helped. But the agent was clearly designed to penetrate standard protections. Beside him, Moth's body emitted a faint blue luminescence that seemed to create a bubble of cleaner air around them both. Not complete protection, but enough to slow the paralytic's effects. They had descended 1 level when Arya voice came through Marcus's communicator, now reduced to a whisper. Hunters responding to diversions. 2 moving towards Sector 4. 1 remains near your route. Marcus nodded. Adjusting their path to avoid the remaining hunter, they moved through increasingly unfamiliar parts of the station maintenance areas that had been automated for decades, rarely visited by human personnel. As they approached a junction, Mothra suddenly froze, its antennae extended forward. Through their link, Marcus sensed danger ahead. The hunter had changed position, was now directly in their path. They backed away, seeking an alternative route, but the station's layout offered limited options. To reach the core, they would need to pass through a section where the hunter was positioned. We need a distraction, Marcus whispered. Something to draw it away just long enough to slip past. Mothra's response was immediate. It could create such a distraction, using abilities it had not yet revealed. but doing so would tax its still recovering strength significantly. Before Marcus could protest, Mothra extended one wing, the bioluminescent patterns coalescing into a bay. Tight, intense spiral. A small section of the wing membrane detached, forming a glowing sphere that hovered between them briefly, before shooting down the corridor, around a corner, and out of sight. Seconds later, alarms blared from that direction, and the station's sensors registered a massive energy spike. Through their link, Marcus understood that Mothra had created a biological energy construct, essentially a decoy that mimicked its own biosignature. The hunter is moving toward the distraction. Area confirmed. Path clear to the core for approximately 3 minutes. They moved quickly, Marcus's legs growing heavier with each step, as the paralytic worked deeper into his system. Mothra stayed close, occasionally supporting him with a surprisingly gentle appendage when he stumbled. The core housing was a circular chamber dominated by the station's compact fusion reactor, outdated technology by current Earth standards, but reliable and stable. Around the reactor's containment field were the control systems Marcus needed to access. Arya, begin emergency overload sequence. Authorization Chen final terminus. Sequence initiated. Manual confirmation required at primary console. Marcus moved to the console, his fingers now numb and clumsy as he input the necessary commands. On the monitor, he could see the reactor's containment field beginning to fluctuate in a controlled pattern that would culminate in a non-destructive energy surge, enough to create the electromagnetic pulse they needed without destroying the station. "How much time do we have after I confirm?" Marcus asked. 45 seconds until pulse discharge, Arya replied. Recommendation: seek shielded area or deactivate all electronic equipment to prevent damage. Marcus looked at Mothra. Can you protect yourself from an EMP? And me? The creature's response was confident its biology wasn't vulnerable to electromagnetic disruption the way human technology was. It could shield Marcus as well, through the same adaptive properties that allowed it to travel through the vacuum of space. As Marcus prepared to enter the final confirmation code, Arya voice cut through. Alert! All 3 hunters converging on core location. Estimated arrival: 30 seconds. The diversion had worked too. Well, the hunters had recognized it as a trap and deduced their true objective. Marcus's hand hovered over the console. If he activated the sequence now, they would still be in the core when the hunters arrived. Mothra moved beside him, its massive wings beginning to unfurl fully within the confines of the core housing. Through their link came a clear intent. Finish it. I will hold them. They'll kill you, Marcus said. You're not at full strength yet. The creature's response carried no fear, only resolve. This was what it had evolved to do: protect its bonded companion, whatever the cost. Marcus made his decision. His fingers flew across the console, confirming the buy. Sequence. Overload confirmed. EMP in 4 to 5 seconds. Immediately, the reactor's hum increased in pitch, the containment field glowing brighter as the controlled overload began. Marcus grabbed his shock baton and moved to Mothra's side, facing the core housing entrance. We fight together, he said simply. The hunters arrived with 15 seconds remaining, bursting through the entrance with weapons raised. They paused momentarily at the sight before them, the human and the fully extended alien creature standing, quote, side by side, the reactor glowing dangerously behind them. The lead hunter made a gesture, and all 3 spread out, clearly intending to capture rather than kill if possible. Their movements were cautious, respectful of Mothra's capabilities despite their technological advantages. Mothra's wings began to pulse with light, patterns shifting more rapidly than Marcus had seen before. Through their connection, he felt the creature gathering energy, preparing some form of defense that would buy them the remaining seconds they needed. The hunters attacked simultaneously, firing weapons that discharged nets of energy rather than destructive beams capture technology. Mothra's wings swept forward, creating a shield of light that the nets couldn't penetrate, but the defense was taxing, and Marcus could feel the strain through their link. 10 seconds to pulse discharge. Arya announced. The lead hunter activated a device on its wrist, and suddenly the air in the core housing seemed to thicken, becoming difficult to breathe. Marcus fell to one knee, struggling against what felt like intense gravitational pressure. Mothra fought against the effect, its wings beating slowly but powerfully, creating counterwaves in the artificial gravity field. The creature moved to crate, stand over Marcus, protecting him from the worst of the pressure. 5 seconds. The hunters advanced, clearly confident in their advantage. The lead hunter reached toward Mothra with a containment device, now just feet away. 3, 2. Mothra's wings suddenly flared with blinding intensity, and Marcus felt the creature's consciousness envelop his own, creating a protective cocoon of awareness just as the world went white. The electromagnetic pulse swept through the station with controlled fury, overwhelming all electronic systems simultaneously. The hunters' equipment failed catastrophically, their suits losing power, and their weapons discharging harmlessly. In the darkness that followed, only Mothra's bioluminescence provided light. The creature stood triumphant, wings extended to their full impressive span. While the hunters struggled with their suddenly useless technology, Marcus pulled himself to his feet, leaning on Mothra for support. "Arya?" he called, but there was no response. The AI system, like all electronics on the station, had been temporarily disabled. The hunters were not defenseless without their technology. They moved with the fluid grace of trained combatants, producing manual weapons blades that seemed to be composed of crystalline material rather than metal. But in the darkness, with only Mothra's controlled bioluminescence for light, the advantage had shifted. The creature could adjust its light patterns at will, creating disorienting strobes and shadows that confused the hunter's movements. Marcus, guided by his link with Mothra, found his way to the core housing's manual override, forcing open the exit door. "This way," he called, though he knew Mothra understood his intent without words. They retreated through the darkened corridors, the paralytic agent in the air now harmless, as the systems pumping it had failed with the pulse. The hunters pursued, but without their tracking technology, they were forced to follow by sight alone in the near darkness. The evacuation bay was 3 levels up and across the station, a journey that would have been trivial with functioning lifts and automated transport, but now required navigating manual access ways and emergency ladders. As they climbed, Marcus felt Mothra's strength growing rather than diminishing. The creature fed on energy and forms humans barely understood, and the EMP had released a feast of free electrons and electromagnetic radiation that it was now absorbing through its wing membranes. By the time they reached the evacuation bay, Mothra was moving with newfound power and grace, its bioluminescence brighter and more controlled. The hunters had fallen behind but were still pursuing, their determination undiminished. The evacuation pod was designed for human USA's small, self-contained vessel with just enough propulsion to reach a safe distance from the station and broadcast an emergency signal. Marcus doubted it would accommodate Mothra's full wingspan. As if sensing his concern, Mothra's body began to change. The giant wings folded and compressed in ways that defied conventional physics, seemingly reducing in size without losing mass. The creature's entire form became more compact, more dense, yet still recognizably itself. "You're full of surprises," Marcus muttered as he worked the manual release for the pod door. The pod's interior was cramped, but functional acceleration seats, minimal life support systems, and simple mechanical controls that would still function after the EMP. As Marcus had feared, even with its compressed form, Mothra barely fit, its body curling around the small cabin's perimeter. Just as Marcus prepared to seal the hatch, the lead hunter appeared at the bay entrance, now wielding what appeared to be a completely mechanical weapon, some kind of projectile launcher unaffected by the EMP. Before Marcus could react, Mothra's wings swept in front of him. There was a sharp impact, and a spray of iridescent fluid the projectile had struck the creature's wing membrane. Pain lanced through Marcus's own shoulder, a phantom echo of Mothra's wound through their bond. He slammed his hand on the hatch control, and the manual mechanism began to close. The hunter fired again, but the projectile ricocheted off the closing hatch. With a final mechanical clunk, the pod sealed, and Marcus activated the emergency launch sequence, a simple mechanical system designed to function even in total power failure. With a violent jolt, the pod ejected from the station, the acceleration pressing Marcus back into his seat. Through the small viewport, he watched Polaris VII recede, the the station now dark and lifeless except for a few emergency chemical lights. "Are you okay?" he asked aloud, turning to Mothra. The creature's response came through their link pane, but not critical damage. Its biology was already working to repair the wing membrane, stemming the flow of the iridescent fluid that Marcus now understood was its equivalent of blood. As the pod stabilized in its trajectory away from the station, Marcus considered their situation. The pod had supplies for perhaps 2 weeks, minimal propulsion, and an emergency beacon that would activate once main station power returned, presumably after the EMP effects dissipated. "Earth Command will respond to the beacon eventually," Marcus said. "But I'm not sure how they'll react to you." Mothra's mental images conveyed understanding of this concern. Humans as a species were unpredictable in their responses to the unknown, sometimes curious and welcoming, sometimes fearful and aggressive. The creature had encountered humans before, over centuries, with varying results. Then came another set of imagestar patterns, navigational concepts, a sense of direction and purpose. Mothra was suggesting an alternative. "You want to guide us somewhere else?" Marcus asked. "Can this pod even make it that far?" The creature's response was complex, but clear. The pod alone couldn't reach their destination. But Mothra, now rapidly recovering its full strength, could augment the vessel's capabilities. Not immediately, it needed time to complete its healing, but soon. Marcus considered the offer. Return to Earth, face endless debriefings, and likely quarantine for both himself and Mothra, with no guarantee of fair treatment for the alien being? Or trust this creature that had already saved his life, embark on a journey into the unknown? "How long would I have to decide?" he asked. Mothra conveyed that the choice remained open. They had time before the pod's beacon would activate, before any course change became necessary. Days at least. As if to emphasize their immediate safety, the creature's bioluminescence dimmed to a gentle glow that filled the pod with soft blue light. Its wing membrane, still healing, curled protectively around Marcus's acceleration couch. For the first time in hours, Marcus allowed himself to relax slightly. They had escaped immediate danger. The hunter's ship might pursue once they regained control of their systems, but the pod's small size and the debris field around the station would make tracking difficult. "I suppose I have time to think about it," Marcus said, feeling exhaustion wash over him as the adrenaline of their escape faded. Through their link, Mothra urged him to rest, conveying that it would maintain watch while he slept. The creature didn't sleep as humans understood. Its consciousness operated in cycles that allowed portions to remain alert, while others regenerated. Marcus didn't intend to sleep, but the events of the day and the lingering effects of the paralytic agent soon overcame his resistance. As he drifted off, images flowed through his mind: alien landscapes, impossible creatures, stars seen from perspectives no human had ever experienced. Mothra was sharing its memories, its experiences across centuries of solitary travel. He woke to a changed environment. The pod's interior had been subtly transformed. Surfaces that had been bare metal now glistened with a thin layer of something that resembled silk, but was harder, more durable. The air felt different, richer somehow, easier to breathe. Mothra had been busy while he slept. The creature now looked fully recovered. Its wing membrane healed without a trace of injury. It had shifted position to accommodate the pod's small space more efficiently. Its body curved around the perimeter in a way that should have been impossible given its size. "You've been redecorating," Marcus observed, running his fingers along the silken surface that now covered the pod's interior. Through their link, he understood that Mothra had created these changes to make the pod more suitable for extended travel, better insulated, with improved air filtration and recycling capabilities derived from brine. Its own biological processes. The creature was preparing for a journey, though still leaving the final decision to Marcus. Marcus checked the pod's mechanical chronometer. He had slept for nearly 18 hours, far longer than he'd expected. Outside the viewport, he could see only the blackness of space, with distant stars providing the only reference points. "How far are we from the station now?" he asked. Mothra conveyed the information through their link: approximately 320,000 kilometers, well beyond immediate pursuit range. The hunters would have regained control of their systems by now, but finding such a small vessel in the vastness of space would be challenging even with their advanced technology. "And where exactly would we go?" if I chose not to return to Earth. The images that flowed into Marcus's mind were both alien and strangely familiar, a space station of sorts, but one built from living material similar to Mothra's cocoon. A gathering place for various species, including others of Mothra's kind and, surprisingly, a small population of humans. These humans, Marcus learned through their link, were like himself, individuals who had formed bonds with Mothra's species over centuries. Some were descendants of those original humans, continuing traditions of cooperation and mutual protection that spanned generations. The station orbited a star in a system approximately 12 light-years from Earth, an impossible distance for the evacuation pod alone, but well within Mothra's capabilities once it fully manifested its space. Traveling form, 12 light-years? Marcus repeated in disbelief. Even the fastest Earth ships would take decades. Mothra's response conveyed gentle amusement at the limitation of human technology, along with reassurance. Its species traveled between stars routinely, compressing space in ways human science had only theorized about. The journey would take approximately 3 months, during which Marcus would be held in a form of stasis, protected within a specialized cocoon Mothra would create. And, if I wanted to return to Earth instead? The creature conveyed complete acceptance of either choice. If Marcus wished to return to his own people, Mothra would ensure the pod reached a shipping lane where rescue would be swift, then would continue its own journey alone. The bond between them would remain, but dormant, a connection across the stars, rather than in physical proximity. Marcus considered his life on Earth a career derailed by tragedy, professional isolation, and the likelihood that even if he returned with groundbreaking discoveries about alien life, the bureaucracy of Earth Command would probably appropriate his research and marginalize his contributions. Then again, choosing to leave with Mothra meant abandoning everything and everyone he had ever known, embarking on a journey with no guarantee of return. Would I ever be able to come back to Earth, to visit? He asked. Mothra's answer was positive. The connection between them would always allow return to Earth space, though direct contact might be complicated by humanity's increasing monitoring of its solar system. Visits would be possible, if careful. As Marcus weighed his options, a new alert appeared on the pod's manual systems: an approaching vessel, significantly larger than their pod, on an intercept course. The hunters? Marcus asked, alarmed. But Mothra's response indicated this was a different ship. Entirely not the hunters, but not Earth Command either. Through their link, Marcus sensed the creature's surprise, and what might be interpreted as pleasure. On the small viewport, Marcus could now see the approaching vessel unlike any ship design he was familiar with. It appeared partially organic in structure, with sections that seemed to pulse and shift, like living tissue integrated with more conventional materials. "Friends of yours?" Marcus asked. The confirmation came with additional context. This was a vessel belonging to another of Mothra's kind, one who had also bonded with a human companion. They must have detected Mothra's distinctive energy signature and changed course to investigate. As the ship drew closer, a communication system within the pod that Marcus hadn't even realized existed suddenly activated. Not Earth technology, but something Mothra had apparently integrated while he slept. A voice spoke, human but with unusual inflections. "Greetings, traveler. I am Elena Vasquez, companion to the one you might call Starweaver. We detected our kindred signature and came to investigate. Are you in need of assistance?" Marcus looked at Mothra, who encouraged him to respond. "This is Dr. Marcus Chen of Earth's Deep Space Research Initiative. I'm with a being I've been calling Mothra, though that's not its real name." A sound like laughter came through the communication. "No, they don't use names as we understand them. Patterns of light and thought serve their purposes better. My companion has been teaching me their ways for nearly 7 years now." "7 years? 7 years?" Marcus repeated. "You've been traveling with them for that long?" "The best 7 years of my life," Eleanor replied warmly. "There are about 30 of us now, humans bonded with the travelers, as we've taken to calling them. Each partnership is unique, but all are built on mutual respect and protection." Marcus felt a surge of curiosity and hope. Here was someone who had made the choice he was contemplating, who had lived with the consequences. "Can I ask, Do you ever regret leaving Earth behind? There was a thoughtful pause before Elena answered. I miss certain things: rainforests, live music, my grandmother's cooking. But what I've gained, Dr. Chen, I've seen worlds no human eyes had ever beheld before. I've learned sciences that make Earth's physics look like kindergarten finger painting. And I've found a connection that goes deeper than any human relationship I've, quote, known. Another pause. But it's not for everyone. The adaptation period is challenging. The isolation can be difficult. And the other humans you mentioned, they feel the same? Most do. A few have chosen to return to Earth over the years, though they maintain their bonds at a distance. The travelers respect individual choice above all else. As they spoke, Mothra communicated with its kindred through means Marcus couldn't fully perceive: patterns of light and electromagnetic signals beyond human senses. Through their link, he caught impressions of the exchange: concern over the hunters, sharing of the events at the station, discussions of safe travel routes. Dr. Chen, Elena continued, we're heading to the gathering place, what you might think of as a home base. Though the concept doesn't quite translate, you and your companion would be welcome to join us. The journey would be safer together, especially if the collectors are still pursuing you. Collectors? The hunters you encountered. They're part of a consortium that collects rare biological specimens throughout the galaxy. They've been after the travelers for generations. Marcus looked at Mothra, who was now pulsing with patterns that somehow conveyed eagerness and hope without being explicit. The creature wasn't pushing him toward any particular choice, but its preference was clear. In that moment, Marcus thought about his life on Earth. The endless reports that no one read. The lingering shadow of Callisto. The sterile isolation of Polaris VII. Then he looked at Mothra, a being of impossible beauty and complexity who had chosen to bond with him, to protect him, to offer him a journey beyond anything a human might normally experience. How do we proceed? He asked Elena, his decision made. The relief and joy that flowed through his link with Mothra was so intense that Marcus felt tears spring to his eyes. The creature's entire body pulsed with light, the patterns forming what he somehow knew was a celebration. We'll bring your pod aboard our vessel, Elena explained. From there, we have about 3 weeks of travel before we reach a safe corridor for the longer jump to the gathering place. As the larger ship maneuvered to retrieve them, Marcus felt a profound sense of rightness settle over him. For years after the Callisto disaster, he had been drifting, punishing himself with isolation, convinced that his greatest contributions were behind him. Now, looking at the alien being that had chosen him as its companion, he understood that his life wasn't ending, but transforming, much like Mothra itself had transformed within its cocoon. Whatever waited beyond this moment would be unknown, challenging, even frightening at times. But it would also be extraordinary. The pod shuddered slightly as tractor beams from the larger vessel locked on, beginning the retrieval process. Mothra's wing curved protectively around Marcus's shoulders, the touch conveying reassurance and shared anticipation. I never imagined when I found you dying in that abandoned lab that we'd end up here, Marcus said softly. I was just trying to save a life. Mothra's response flowed through their link, a concept that didn't translate perfectly into human language, but conveyed that sometimes the smallest acts of compassion opened the greatest doorways. By saving what appeared to be a dying creature, Marcus had not only gained a protector, but had opened a path to the stars themselves. As their pod was drawn into the larger vessel's docking bay, Marcus caught his first glimpse of Elena Vasquez and her companion through the viewport, a human woman in her mid-30s standing beside another being similar to Mothra, but with patterns that shimmered in golds and violets, rather than blues. The moment felt historic to Marcus, not just personally, but for humanity. These connections between species, these bonds that transcended the normal boundaries of evolution and environment, represented possibilities he had only theorized about in his xenobiological research. Ready? He asked Mothra as the pod's hatch began to open. The creature's wings flared slightly, bioluminescence brightening in what Marcus now recognized as enthusiasm. Together, they stepped from the pod into their new life. The scientist who had rescued a dying alien creature, not knowing it would become his guardian, his companion, and his gateway to the stars. In the years that followed, Dr. Marcus Chen would sometimes look back on that fateful day in the abandoned section of Polaris VII, marveling at how a simple act of compassion had altered the course of his existence. The bond between human and alien grew stronger with each passing day, each new world they explored together, each challenge they overcame. And sometimes, on the observation deck of the living station that the humans called Heaven's Reach, Marcus would watch his companions soar through the starlit void outside, its massive wings now spanning 30 feet, its bioluminescence outshining nearby stars as it danced in the vacuum with others of its kind. In those moments, he knew with absolute certainty that he had made the right choice. For he was no longer alone, no longer adrift. He had found his purpose in the most unlikely of places, in the heart of a creature born among distant stars, who had crossed the void to find him and who would protect him until the end of his days.